Now, let me introduce Ricky. And I just so you know, I found Ricky through Income School YouTube videos. I got hooked on it. And I learned so much. I'm not an affiliate marketer. I have my own Global Specs is my own company. I've had it for about 20 years. So we do SEO for myself as well as for our clients. So all the things that you talk about in your YouTube videos have been so relevant and made so much sense. But you had a partner. Is he still around? Are you a silent partner, or is he the two of you?
So he moved, and when that happened, we were running it he was remote, but we have a physical team here. We record videos all the time. After about 6 months of that, we just decided it'd be better if it was one or the other. So I bought his shares, or I'm working on buying his shares, but now it's 100% me, and I have a great team here in Idaho.
How many websites do you own and manage right now?
Right now, about 20.
20 websites. That's insane. Yeah. And you just keep buying up websites, don't you?
We buy, lately we've been building more than buying, but we have several in our portfolio that we bought as well.
Yeah, that's right. And they run the gamut, right? They run the several different types of them, but they're all pretty much how-to type of websites is my.
Yeah. Yeah, for the most part, it really is kind of running the gamut in different industries, different niches. But that's kind of what we know and what we're good at.
How long have you been doing this?
So I've been doing it for about 7 years. Jim, who was my partner, he was doing it for about 4 or 5 years before that. And that was kind of where it came from.
Wow. Awesome. And how many are on your team right now?
So I've got a full-time staff here of 5 other team members. And then we have writers who work for us that work near a couple of college campuses. And the number of writers we have at any given time kind of varies between about 30 and 50.
And you have a really great process. That was another video you had about how you build out your blogs and how you prepare for them. And I think even the one where you talked about the more detailed side of it, of like the best blogs, how to write the best blogs. So if you guys are, when we're done, Ricky does his presentation, I will absolutely share the YouTube channel, which I've already done in our Facebook group, but I will absolutely share it in our email marketing here when we send that out. So anyway, thank you, Ricky. And I've given you the floor. I've spoken too long and made you guys wait too long. So let's get started and get you going here.
No problem. Can you give me screen sharing?
I think you should have it now.
The co-host. Do I? I don't see it.
Multiple person can share. If not, I will make you a host.
Okay.
There we go.
There. Yep, there it is. Okay. All right. So, yeah, that was a great introduction. Thank you, Christina. Let me start this. All right, you guys see that okay?
Yeah.
Awesome.
Yep.
So just to add on just a little bit to what Christina shared, a little bit about me. I used to be an engineer. That's what I went to school for, chemical engineering. I worked in industry for about 8 years. And while in industry, I also worked on and earned an MBA. Business kind of became my thing. I actually knew pretty early on, even before I graduated with my undergrad, that I didn't want but I didn't want to be working for other people forever. I always wanted to have at least something on the side to be able to sort of take control of my own income and my time. And so it's something I kind of always worked toward. So the MBA was kind of to help me at least get into leadership or management positions. And then about 7 years ago, while I was still working, I started Income School with my former partner, Jim. 4 years ago, it reached the point that I was able to leave my day job and do this full time. So for about 4 years now, almost exactly now, this is what I've been doing with all my time. I'm married. I have 5 kids, a nice big family. And when I'm not working, which I do a lot because I actually really enjoy my work, but I also love spending time with my family, and we love the outdoors. And then so Income School. Jim and I started Income School back in 2015. And we created it. The intent was to help people take control of their income. The focus has been a lot on building niche websites, in part because that's kind of where we had a differentiator. And we based it initially off of the experience that Jim had. He started years before blogging about photography. His website was improvephotography.com, and he built it up pretty big. That was kind of in the early days of affiliate marketing. There weren't a lot of people teaching it. And so he had the luxury of making some mistakes and kind of figuring it out along the way. But he reached a point where he'd built that site, he'd bought some sites and sold some sites, and he had a bit of a process, a starting point of a process. And at that point, he knew he wanted to teach it. He wanted to share it. He didn't feel like there were great mentors in the space yet at that time. And so he wanted to help other people do that. But he also knew he needed a partner. So that's when he reached out to me. We've been friends for over 20 years now. We were friends in high school. And he knew that I'm kind of the business-minded and really organized person. And so he partnered with me, and we started that up. And what we do, we rely on and we teach content marketing as just a great means to generate traffic and then earn an income. That's kind of expanded into other things, but here's a bunch of sites. These are sites. Every one of these is a site we've built that we don't, and a few of them we bought and then built up from there. We don't own any of these anymore. So a couple of years ago, we sold off our whole portfolio because the idea was we wanted to start over. We never wanted to be those teachers that are not currently doing what we're teaching. And so we sold those off. We refocused on a few things in our teaching of internet marketing, kind of honed our processes even more further, and then started over. And that's where we're at today. And we got a bunch of sites. Here are 6 of them that we've publicly talked about. We're a little careful about publicly talking about all of our sites because we need some that we can build up without that, I guess, kind of the benefit of our YouTube channel. When we talk on YouTube, we have a pretty sizable audience. And if we mention a website, we see a spike in traffic for the next few days. And whenever that happens, our traffic kind of reaches it levels off at a little bit higher level. So that mention, even if there's no backlink, that mention helps us from an SEO standpoint. Our organic traffic rises. And so in order to have some kind of clean case studies, we have a lot of sites we don't mention. And like I mentioned before, it's over 20 websites now. It's about 20 kind of niche websites like these ones here, in addition to the Income School website. And then another brand that we have is Channel Makers, which is all about YouTube. Income School teaches a lot about blogging, building up these websites, niche websites, and content marketing from a written content standpoint. And Channel Makers focuses on YouTube to generate, to use content for marketing purposes. So this was our first team of writers. We started this a few years ago, a little over 3 years ago, 3.5. Very first team of writers. And what it forced us to do, and what was really great about it, was it forced us to really systematize what we were doing. So, we had kind of our process and we were teaching it, but when we hired our own writers, we were able to really quickly start getting feedback from their work as to what was working, what instruction we were teaching that really sunk in, and what was kind of flying over their heads. And that's helped us refine our teaching process. So we have a membership called Project 24. Not here to pitch that, but that's when I say I'm teaching, that's what we're doing. And so we're constantly refining the way that we teach content marketing based upon what we're able to get out of college students who are at least partially college educated, capable writers. Many of these are studying English or communications. And so when we teach something and it's not sinking in, it helps us to know what's working and what's not. Just some little bit of, I guess, sort of proof or whatever. This is one of our websites. This was Camper Report. It's one we did talk about publicly. This was over the course of about 4 years. We grew a site organically from 0 to just over 300,000 page views a month. This website sold for, I didn't write it down, but if I remember right, it was about $320,000 back in 2019. And all of the income almost was from ads and a little bit from affiliate marketing. The next one, just a couple here. This was a site with the content written 100% by our team of writers. And it was about pets, which, you know, a lot of bloggers would look at that and say, oh, that's a pretty competitive space. And yet in under 8 months, we grew that site to almost 90,000 page views a month. We sold that one with all those other sites as well. And then here's another one where, again, all content written by that team with a little bit of content we'd previously written on some other sites that we lumped together. We moved the content, redirected it to this new website. So that gave it a little bit of an early boost, hence why from March to April, it was a little bit faster incline than you normally see. But still built that to about 80,000 page views. And today, the guy that bought that site, he got the best deal in the world because there was a ton of content on it and it was under monetized. So he's actually, both of these two websites I just mentioned, the pet site and then this one, have grown substantially. And we've done some follow-ups with them. They're great people. So I was glad to be able to do that. So, you know, the presentations, how do we build these websites too? You know, and I wasn't exaggerating when I say to millions. So content marketing drives literally millions of dollars per year to our business, just through organic content. We don't use any paid advertising. Once we kind of dabbled in Facebook ads, it was just not nearly as effective for us as just content marketing. So what do we do? How does that work? It starts with, I mean, it's things like this. We actually have a video that kind of outlines this, a couple years ago version of this. In fact, you can't see the whole thing on the screen right now, but I do have a link to it in the presentation, and I'll share the presentation with you guys afterwards. But for the most basic type of blog post, we've created just kind of a recipe of what that post should look like to help optimize the on-page SEO. So some of the things we have here, we have title. Now here we tell our writers, we give you the title, but really we're writing titles that a human would want to click on, not clickbait titles, but sufficiently descriptive titles that are also interesting, that go kind of beyond just the, here's what this article is about. Then we tell them, write a couple sentences that establish that you're a human being, that not, that it's not an AI that wrote this article and that you know the industry. And then we write what we call an answer target. Answer targets are segments of content that are essentially written so that Google could easily grab that and make that a rich snippet, put it right at the top of the search results. This has actually driven a ton of traffic to brand new websites, because oftentimes we're writing these articles on topics that don't have great resources on the web yet. And so when we write a really, really good answer target, Google will quickly identify that's a good snippet. And suddenly a website with no history, no credibility is showing up at the very top of the search results over and over and over again. And as we get that early traffic, it builds that early authoritativeness, and we're able to start ranking for more and more competitive things. And we teach everybody, then we're going to write, like 3 or 4 subheadings that sort of break the topic down. And then it makes writing very, very fast, because when a writer looks at that and says, oh, well, I'm just writing like 4 300 word or 200 word sections instead of 1,000 word blog post, we're finding that people are able to write much more quickly, but also write in a manner that's more optimized for SEO. So it's things like this that help. But probably the most valuable thing that we do is this. It's search analysis. Search analysis is, you hear like we kind of make up names for these things because we do so many things different than kind of what the industry is what people know. And so instead of keyword research, we do search analysis. Search engines are not keyword driven anymore. They're driven by search queries. And so we're not trying to figure out the right keywords. We're trying to identify search queries that people are actually searching and that are not overly competitive. It's really that simple.
Ricky,
Yeah.
I'm going to interrupt you for a second. Since I switched hosts, I lost the record. Is it showing record for you?
Yes, it still shows that it's recording.
Okay, good. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Thank you.
No
Sorry to
problem.
interrupt.
And because I'm in like presentation mode, I see that there are chats, but I can't like click on them.
Oh, it's okay. I'll let you know if there's a question.
Great. Awesome.
So far, so good.
So our approach to search analysis is pretty different than what most people are doing. We don't, I don't oppose, but we don't generally use the keyword tools that most content writers are using to identify search queries. We're not, it's very different. We're actually just going to Google and using things like Google's auto suggest to identify things that people are searching for. If Google is auto suggesting something, it's because Google thinks that that's what we would be searching for. So, there's an example here on the left side, and depending how big your screen is, you might not be able to see it, but where, what's typed in here is kayak safety tips. Now that's a full search query. And you can see that like, it's a fairly competitive topic. A lot of people are going to write articles about some aspect of kayak safety tips. But that's what a lot of bloggers would write or would think of. But if I go, let's see if I can do this. Let's see. All right. If I then just go to Google and I start typing in a search query, so how to safely kayak. Now that could be considered a full search query, but we see that Google's suggesting some other search queries. How to safely kayak alone, how to safely kayak with a baby. I don't know how many people are searching that. I don't know that I would write a whole article about that, but could I include an answer to that question in an article and potentially rank for run number 1 for the people that are actually searching that? Because I don't know how many people are answering that in blog posts. It's not coming to their minds. How to safely store a kayak, how to safely transport a kayak. And so this is a starting point. The other thing I can do is I can hit enter. And then I see what the people also ask is. This has become a fantastic tool. The auto suggest has sometimes been suggesting things over the last year or two, especially, that I really question how much search volume there really is. But the people also ask seems to lead us in a good direction. So here I see like, what are the dangers of kayaking? Well, that's a little bit different. That's not how to safely kayak. So this tells me people that are searching about kayak safety, this is one of the questions they have. When should you not kayak? This could be referring to when in terms of like certain weather conditions, certain times of year, but it also could be like, physical circumstances, like personal circumstances. When should you not kayak? The other thing I can do is click on one of these. And then when I close it, there's a couple more that have been added. Here, if I'm like, what are people searching for when they're talking about tipping over easily? Well, let me go do that search. And then let's see what the people also ask is there. And as we go down this path, we're identifying sort of how Google is their knowledge map of this topic, all the different search queries that they see as related. And as we go through this, we're going to find some where the content that shows up right here is not very helpful for the search query that's being asked, if that makes sense. And so as we work through that process, we're going to identify a whole list of potential search queries. And then we're going to start by writing articles on those search queries where the competition is minimal or is least. So that's really the simple version of this. Now we have a lot in our search analysis methodology, but that's high level. That's what we're looking for. And then we identify from there. So which content is worth creating? So if it shows up in those places and the competition is fairly low, we consider it worth creating. A lot of people would look at that and say, well, okay, but if I search in Ahrefs, it tells me the search volume is very low. So why would I write an article that only 50 people are even searching for every month? And this is one of the reasons we don't recommend the use of those tools until somebody really has been doing this process this way for a while. And it's because the search volume numbers for these more long tail kind of search queries are inaccurate from a statistical point of view. When they're using a sampling of, they're just using a sampling of all search queries, of all searches being made on the web. And a sample is very accurate for the middle of the bell curve, right? But a sampling becomes less and less accurate the further out you go along the tails. And so for long tail keywords, the sample size that any of those tools are able to get compared to the huge volume of search queries, it leads to very overrepresented or very underrepresented numbers in those samples. And so you'll get long tail keywords that say, oh, the search volume is very high. And you'll get some that say, no, the search volume is basically zero. And the reality is it's somewhere in between for most of them. And so we write articles all the time that get thousands of page views organically every month, that every keyword tool out there tells you not that it's essentially zero or maybe 50 page views a month. And so we don't rely on those. We rely on if Google tells us it's one of those things that people are searching, then usually that's good enough for me. Now we do have some other, it's more of a thought exercise beyond that. And that is this concept of, we call it the inverted pyramid. It actually comes from journalism, but the idea being that when we're talking about kind of entry-level search queries that, whatever the topic is, let's say it's something hobby-based like kayaking, there are search queries that people who are just kind of interested in kayaking or curious about it, that they're going to ask. And those are going to have very high volume. We consider that kind of the base of this pyramid. Then on the other end of the spectrum, there are search queries that you're only going to search if you're like really into this. You already have kayaks. Maybe you're even like doing competitive kayaking. There's a very small number of people relatively that are going to do those search queries. And then there's a whole spectrum in between. And so just going through that mental exercise of identifying where in that pyramid is this search query can also help to kind of gut check whether or not this is a good search query. So that's, search analysis in a nutshell. This is a quote by Martin Splitt. He's, I think today he's actually one of Google's, what do they call him? Search advocates, but he was a trends analyst when he said this. And he says, you have to have really good content. And that means you have to have content that serves a purpose for the user. He's talking about this from an SEO standpoint. So we can do all the technical SEO we want. But if our content doesn't serve a purpose for a specific, for a user, then nobody's searching it. It doesn't serve any value. So this is our approach to SEO. And this is how we're able to drive so much organic traffic to our websites, which we then monetize through various means. We create the most helpful resource for specific search queries that aren't overly competitive. It's that simple. If we can make Google's job, or Bing, or whatever, all the search engines, if we can make their job easy by writing good content that we're very clear about what this is about, then beyond that, depending especially on the niche and just sort of how competitive it is, as well as how much Google cares about getting the answer right. So there are certain topics that are considered YMYL, your money, your life, where Google's very concerned about making sure that correct answers are given, correct, however they define that. And so in those cases, and really in every case to some extent, EAT, which is the expertise, authoritativeness, and trustworthiness, is very valuable from an SEO standpoint, as well as topical authority. So this is something that's really come about a lot in the last few years, but one of the factors that establishes that EAT is simply like the volume and quality of content around the topic. So, sometimes people will make the mistake of picking a niche for a website, or even if you have a WordPress website for a business that serves some other purpose, but we're going to take the whole industry that we're in and just like write a splattering of content across various topics. Well, from Google's perspective, they're not seeing authoritativeness around specific topics. They're seeing a wide range of content, of topics of content. And so by making sure that we sort of cover in more depth, a smaller number of topics, and then expand outward from there, we're able to build topical authority, which helps with that EAT. And really, EAT is what people are going for when they do link building. You're trying to show that you have authoritativeness, that your site is authoritative and trustworthy. Like I say, we're kind of contrarian in some ways. We don't do active link building. Any of the outreach that we do, I have a bullet point here, market content to appropriate audiences. We call this industry outreach. If I go get interviewed on a podcast, I'm going to get a link, but that's not why I go beyond the podcast. I'm on the podcast to get my message out in front of somebody else's audience. The process of doing that establishes me as an authority in that space, more so than just the value of the link. And so I think even just calling it link building causes people to go into those activities with the wrong goal in mind. If the goal is just a link, then doesn't really matter what I say on a podcast. Doesn't matter what I say here at WordCamp to you guys. If it's just for a link, what does it matter? But if my goal is to establish authoritativeness, then I'm going to go into it with a different perspective. I'm going to try to build relationships. I'm going to prepare a good presentation, and share things that establish me as an authority. And then the other thing that this requires typically is patience. On a brand new website, we found that oftentimes it's 6 to 9 months. If you're not trying to game the system and just like get a ton of links up front, oftentimes it's 6 to 9 months. Now, by writing those answer targets, and we actually have not just those answer paragraphs, but various ways that we teach to win those Google snippets, we have found very new websites quickly ranking. Also, we found that in some industries where there's just not a lot of content, brand new websites they're getting traffic very quickly. But on average, we find it's about 6 to 9 months from the time you start creating a volume of good content before you start getting a sizable amount of organic traffic. So it's not an overnight success sort of thing. Now, from what we teach, most of what you'll see like on our YouTube channel, it kind of makes the assumption that people are doing essentially what Jim was doing back in the day, which was creating a website in whatever industry they're interested in, getting traffic and then monetizing it. But that's not really the only approach. I've worked with some larger companies who are starting to try to implement this same approach to get organic traffic to their websites and build their brands. And so that's kind of taking it from the other direction. Let me dive through some of the monetization. The way that these blogs are being monetized, you can see how this is so applicable kind of no matter if you're trying to make money from and using your website to do that. This is what content marketing does for us. So most bloggers are making a sizable amount of their money just from programmatic ads. They're using companies like Ezoic, Mediavine, AdThrive, or even just Google AdSense to place ads on their website So they're, we're not selling direct ads most of the time. It's just these programmatic ads that are kind of optimized for these blogs. Affiliate marketing is probably next in terms of just sort of the volume for most of our audience. And then we have people are selling courses and other digital products. Lumped in with that, I would also include consulting. A lot of people are doing virtual consulting where, somebody buys some of your time. And oftentimes that's like, I make a purchase and I get a survey, I fill it out to give the consultant some information about what my questions are. And then that consulting often happens either synchronously through a call or asynchronously through just a response to that survey. And then e-commerce and lead generation. So, these ad networks we're seeing, Ezoic, Mediavine, and AdThrive, depending on the site, they're kind of paying out the same amount. So we're seeing anywhere from about $10 to $30 most of the time, with some sites exceeding well beyond the $30 mark. I see $40, $60, and even $80 per 1,000 page views, depending on the niche and depending on the implementation of ads. So this is kind of what people are expecting. AdSense can be implemented really well and earn the same amounts, but most people aren't implementing it really well. And so most people on AdSense are earning substantially less. Affiliate marketing, this is, again, when you guys get this presentation, you can see there are links here to these videos, but with affiliate marketing, a lot of people are just using products on Amazon and collecting their 3% commission. But there are a lot of affiliate networks out there. And then there's other opportunities. This is Cassidy Tuttle. She's got a website, succulentsandsunshine.com, I think. And her blog's just all about succulents. And she actually reached out to a supplier in Florida who sells a soil mix for succulents. And she worked with him to create an affiliate program. And so she sells dirt and makes hundreds of thousands of dollars a year selling dirt for a guy in Florida. Or at least she did 2 years ago. I haven't talked to her much recently, but I know she's very active still in the blogging space. This is an example of, this is our membership. When we talk about courses, digital products, information products, we have a membership with numerous courses. We have a blogging system and a YouTube system for people so they can choose sort of their track. And I mentioned we have 2 different sort of channels of content marketing to drive those sales. This for us is driving, like I said, well over $1 million a year in revenue, a couple million a year in revenue. But tag that onto advertising, affiliate marketing, as well as all of our blogs. And you can see how content marketing really is, even for what I would consider a small business like mine, driving that kind of revenue. You take that same approach and you apply it to a business that is already, it's larger, it's more established, it's got a whole supply chain, and just greater monetization already built in, but it's currently relying on more traditional advertising approach. We add in content marketing to that, and what it can do for the business can be substantial. Here's an example. This is a guy, it's another YouTube video that we did, but this is a member of our Project 24 membership who he had an e-commerce business. He does laser engraving of rings and all sorts of other things. So you just order those on his website, and he just had a Shopify store and was paying a ton of money for ads to just get the traffic to his Shopify store. And then he decided to look into content marketing, joined Project 24. He actually came to an event that we hosted a couple of years ago. And at the time of this video, and it's grown since then, he had built his business to a net income of $120,000 a year without any paid ads anymore. So he was making more money than he was before, but also spending a lot less on ads, which is awesome. And then another method that not as many are using, it's actually a little bit more complicated, and a lot of people don't love it. But it's lead generation. I don't love it because every time I go put in my email, to be a lead, to get information about something, I then suddenly get spammed by like, 500 insurance agents trying to sell me a policy or something. So I don't love it, but it's an approach that works really well. This is another interview we did on YouTube of a member who relies on this. He's in the financial space. He wasn't at the time getting very much traffic, 8,000 page views a month, but he was making almost $5,000 a month just from that small amount of traffic and he's very upfront about it. Like, you want more information, or you want someone to reach out, someone in your area who's a certified whatever, to reach out to you, enter your basic information. And then just the sale of those leads is generating him what for him is a full-time income. And that on top of just his own personal finance business, whatever he had going in kind of his day job, this created an awesome supplemental income. So that's really what we're doing. That's how this whole thing works. Like I say, most of the people who are in Project 24, a lot of people watching our channels, they're coming at this from the standpoint of, I have a day job. I want to do content marketing on the side because I want to build a side income. I want to take some more control over my income. I want to get control of my time. And if someday it can replace my job, that would be fantastic. But we're seeing people like the guy with the e-commerce business, but also I've been working with a couple of larger organizations who are catching on, who are using this same approach of content marketing to really start trying to drive organic traffic. I used to work for HP, a really big company, and this is just something that they didn't get. Now, I mean, they do a great job with their TV spots and whatever else, but they were buying ad space all over the web because that's the only way they knew how to get people to see their products. And what we're seeing is if you can create the right content or partner with content creators, which is what we would today generally call like influencer marketing. So this is happening across social media as well, not just blogging, not just YouTube, but relying on people who are influencers in their space. Suddenly you can get that traffic a lot more organically and in a way that people trust. When I see a commercial on TV, which my kids like never see anymore because everything's streamed, I don't inherently have trust. But when you're talking about, someone who's provided me with helpful, valuable content already, suddenly there's a new layer of trust. If we can add then on top of that, and this is where kind of we step outside the WordPress space, but if we can add video on top of that, then suddenly that relationship, the rapport that you build even moves a step further. And so we found that video content, even if it's just video embedded in the site, when we add video content on top of that, we build a higher level of rapport. And suddenly we have a lot more capability to be influential to the people who are reading our content. So not only are we getting more eyeballs on the content, we're also able to convert those eyeballs into purchases. And so that's the approach. That's what we're doing. I've got time here. I'd be happy to take questions or talk more about things that you guys want to know. This slide deck, you guys can get it.
I know I do.
Yeah, absolutely. But you guys, you can get the slide deck here at incomeschool.com/wordcamp-2022. And then in the slide deck, there's those couple links to those YouTube videos and that post recipe. You can get that there as well. But yeah, I'm happy to take questions. I've been talking a lot.
And if anyone's got any questions, feel free to unmute. This is a meetup, this isn't as formal as some others. So feel free to unmute and ask any questions. For me, so obviously I run an agency and I have a writer. And I wonder if it would behoove her or if it would be best for her to actually go and join Income School so she learns the best practice, because there's only so much I can teach her. She is a writer. And I have my own recipe. Of course, now I'm going to steal yours, but but I'm wondering if anybody that's wanting to learn to write a blog post the right way if that's what Income School could do. It's not so much that I wanted to learn how to make money, but the best way to write a blog post. Do you have people like that in the group?
We do, to some extent. We have, we actually have inside, and I think this kind of maybe answers Joe's question a little bit as well, that I see just in the chat. We actually have members of Project 24 who saw a need in this space for more writers who knew how to write in the ways we teach. And that post recipe is kind of one type of blog post, and it's, we use it a lot, but there's other types of blog posts that we write as well. And we go through those inside of Project 24. And it's been tricky because we have members who saw that gap. And so they created their writing agencies and trained writers to write using our methods. And so it was one of those tricky things. It's like, do their writers need to join, or can they create training? And so right now what we've done is kind of licensed to them the right to create their own training content for their own writers. But I think as we have more people like you who have an agency, maybe want to have your own writers, I think there's probably some value in us sort of pulling together the relevant content and creating almost like a mini course that they could purchase without need, because they don't
I'd do it.
Want all the rest of it. Yeah.
Oh yeah.
So
in a heartbeat. Like, all right,
we don't have that yet.
Head on over to the mini course.
Yep, exactly. So
Awesome.
I like that idea, because I do think we're going to see more and more of that. I've been having requests for that a lot more lately, because of people with agencies that want to start doing this. And then Joe, where do you
for agency owners? I mentor a whole bunch of agency owners, and so that's always a need of. And in fact, Joe brings up like you're saying, there's that gap of writing good writers. Yes, you can use companies like Floxy, people like that have writers, but I always had to give them a blog brief. This is the format, but I always had to go back and adjust because they just weren't completing it like a really good instruction type post. It was like, we at this agency love to do it. I'm like, oh, good Lord, And so, that's the hard thing, Joe, is finding quality writers that know this process.
Yeah, we have to, whenever we hire writers, we kind of have to untrain what they expect when they think blogging, right? We have to take 90% of what we would consider fluff content, just get rid of it.
Fluff.
We want
of wars.
And we want, to some extent, depending on the niche and the topic specifically, we want some level of, most of the time we want some level of, familiarity. We generally tell them, take the tone that your neighbor who you're not best friends with, but each other, comes and asks you this question. How would you present the answer to them if you just knew the answer? And take maybe that sort of friendly tone, but not fluff, and that's worked pretty well. But then there are a lot of industries where it's like, no, you're going to need to take even a more professional tone beyond that. And so that was one of the things that the very first semester that we hired college students, we had to undo. We had to take that completely out.
Right, because they've been writing papers, right?
Yes.
They've been writing very formal papers, and this is just a very different methodology. I agree.
Right. Well, and then they're like, okay, well, blogging, all right, I can do that. And then immediately it's like, well, let me tell you a story from my life about the topic.
Creative writing class. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't.
And then it's a mix of SEO and blog writing too. Then there's this other merging where you kind of have to appease the Google gods without pissing them off. So somehow there's this other side to it. Like, you wanted to make a blog that is relevant, informative, has screenshots and that's another thing that I find writers don't do, is they don't go out and get the research, and they're afraid to link to their research. I'm like, no, it's okay. I'll link the ones that you've done. But screen grabs, that's the other thing the writers miss, is the visual component. Because I know you talk a lot about tables, like really good data, really good instructions, step 1, step 2, headings, subheadings. But I'll never forget that one video you did was like, you guys got into really good comparisons between the two different types of blog posts. One was just informative. The other one was like really instructional. It really got into detail and compared products and pictures. And you were recommending too that the photos don't always come from some Amazon picture. Like you got to buy the product, use the product, take pictures of you with the product. And it's just that eat. It's all part of that eat as well. And that, I think that's the hard thing. That's really difficult.
It is. Well, and especially when we move into this space of wanting to find other writers, because then it's like, okay, how do we do that? So if we're, if we have our own team of writers or, somebody who writes for us consistently, then, okay, I can, if I want to write about a product or something along those lines, maybe I send the product to them and give them guidance on what testing I want. They can take a photo on their cell phone. In fact, for blogging, unless you're like, again, as an agency, you maybe want something more professional, but for most bloggers, it's like, if the photo doesn't look like it was taken by a professional photographer, it's probably better. And, so if I take my phone and take a selfie with the product or whatever, or I show the thing I'm talking about when I'm explaining this part of this product is kind of frustrating, but here's how I dealt with it. And I can show that, you've just leveled up, because 90% of the other blog content on the same topic was written by someone who's never touched the product and they're summarizing Amazon reviews. So yeah, finding affordable writers. Affordable is kind of the tough part too, because there's a big trade-off. There's some writing services out there, like iWriter and hirewriters.com. There's a few of those where, yeah, there's several. And it's tricky because a lot, if you kind of pay their lowest tier, you're going to get like non-native English speakers writing the content. In many cases, they're going to do it quickly. No research. No research. They're just going to look at some other blog posts other people wrote, and they're just going to take that and rewrite it in different words so it passes a plagiarism checker. I mentioned we have a few members of Project 24 who've created services, and we actually made our own as well. We're almost always sold out because, we have 30 to 50 writers, and they're always busy. So ours is called contentwarrior.com. There's textgoods.com. There's Passion Posts is one I really like. They cost a little more usually, but what Passion Post does, and again, they're Project 24 member, their writers are all trained to write content the way we do. But what they do is whatever the topic is, whatever kind of the industry it is, they get people to write for them that are experts in that industry. So like he has people in the medical industry who whenever he gets a medical topic, he sends it to them. So the turnaround's not as quick. And I don't remember what his pricing is. I think it's fairly comparable to the other ones I just mentioned. So yeah, that's passionposts.com. I think I'll put that there. I mentioned, so Text Goods, and the other one is We Write Blog Posts. So those three, they're all, and I didn't put the HTTPS, so it's not hyperlinking, but those are all writing services that were created out of Project 24. We don't have any stake in them at all, but they write using our methods. And so we're talking like actually doing research. Our writers, if they're writing an article about a pet, they're going to call a veterinarian or at least a pet store, and just ask their questions. Anything they can't find online, they're gonna try to answer additional stuff beyond just what other blogs are already answering, so that we have something unique and original to add. And so these guys are doing that kind of stuff. And then again, the way that we write our articles and all that we include in it is written in a way to be user friendly, but still like say, appease the Google gods. It's the on-page SEO to make sure that we're kind of covering all those bases.
Would you think, I mean, next level blog posts, I mean, I'm wondering if now the next level is to always have some kind of video on the blog post. So now we're expanding this whole concept. Like my daughter just created a vanilla cake.
Mhm.
When I went to print just the recipe itself, there were 50 pages in this thing. It was humongous just to make a vanilla cake. History of the vanilla cake. Literally describing every single product in the ingredient list, from the pans to the butter to everything. And I'm like, is this overkill? Because I didn't need any of this stuff.
Yep.
And I know they're trying to get into the Google, which obviously I clicked on it. They were #1. So, there you go.
Right.
But I'm just wondering at what level between video, I mean, that was insane to me. So I'm just curious what your thoughts are.
It's interesting because recipes have become so competitive, because for vanilla cake, there are probably 400 recipes on the internet. And there's been this idea for a long time. And to some extent, I think it has been true that the longer the content, the better it ranks. That's not totally true, but they correlate. And what we've come to realize is the reason they correlate today is not because Google has, in their algorithm, well, which one's longer? It's more like, well, this one covers the topic in more depth. And so I think mixed in with all of that stuff you didn't need, there are the pieces are there that make Google feel like, oh, this article has more depth, even though 90% of it is useless to most readers. And I actually said that in a video once, and I got a lot of negativity from recipe bloggers because they say, no, you have to do it. And you should care about the history of the recipe. And I'm like,
I don't really.
You can't tell the user what they should want. Like you don't.
I just want to make a vanilla cake. That's all it
exactly.
was.
Like that's all I want. I want a list of ingredients and the steps to make it. And if you give me just that, we're good. And then, so whenever we write recipes, because we do have a website that's in the cooking space, we decided to take a totally different approach, which is our content is almost entirely just about the cooking topics, not the recipes themselves. So the main emphasis of the site is cooking for groups of people, large groups, family reunions, weddings, so events, just holidays. We got a huge spike in traffic around Thanksgiving on a couple of articles around mashed potatoes and stuffing, like how much to make for a group of 30 people, that kind of stuff. And then we'll add recipes to the site that we link to from those articles. That's like, and here's also how we make our mashed potatoes. And that's been really effective. And so we can avoid all that. And then in our recipes, we have the recipe. And then if we're going to have any other text, it's going to be tips that help you make it better. So if there's, when I write a recipe on there, it's something I actually make, and I can say, by the way, the recipe says this, but let me explain this, because if you do this, it's actually going to make it a lot easier. Or if you do this at this stage, it's easier. If you try to do it at this stage, it's not. Or anytime that I have something of value to add to make it easier to actually make the food and be successful, that goes in the recipe. Even if it's not technically part of the recipe. That's what I would do.
The ever-present question: is there a good target for the number of words or range of words for an article? Oh, what are you going to say?
Kind of. I'm going to say yes to some extent. So we usually shoot for, on kind of the smaller topics, we usually shoot for about 1,000 words, which some bloggers are like, are you crazy? 300 words is enough to answer the question. Usually what we find is, if we tell a writer, even ourselves to some extent, but especially if we have another writer writing for us and we say, hey, this one could probably be covered in 500 words. What they do is they still include kind of their minimum level of fluff that they're going to include, and they just don't go into the same level of depth. So we tried that on a website. We told the writer, let's try 750 words. And what we found was it was all more superficial. Almost all the writing was more superficial. At about 1,000 words, we find for, a topic where you're kind of answering one main question, but then exploring the caveats is usually the way I look at it. I'm not necessarily answering a bunch of other questions that are close. What I'm usually doing is saying, here's the answer you're looking for, but the real answer is it depends. So let's look at what it depends on, and so that you can actually know the real answer to your question. And I find that's more effective. If in an article I then start going astray on related topics, then suddenly it's harder for Google to know which topic my article is about. Then we have a lot of other blog posts where it's even more depth. Maybe it's a how-to blog post. Maybe it's one where we did a lot of research. And for those, it's usually about 2,000 to 2,500 words. And I don't usually go a lot beyond that. I've written some 3,000, 3,500 word articles, but if I get much beyond that, then I'm getting to a point where maybe I'm trying to cover too much in a single blog post. And so that's probably going to be my range. It's somewhere from about 1,000 to 3,000 words most of the time. I'm sure there are exceptions. Excuse me. I'm sure there are exceptions that fall outside.
Those like pillar posts, right? Like you kind of want to have one really, really good long post.
Yes.
That's,
yeah.
And then subcategories of posts like that. Yeah,
exactly. A lot of times what we'll do is if there's kind of a pillar topic for even just a category on our website, maybe we'll have one really big meaty post, but in that post, I'm going to cover that whole topic, but I'm probably going to do it not superficially, but kind of in a medium level of depth on each aspect of it. And then on those different aspects of it, I might have a whole article that's 1,000 words on that piece of it that I interlink between them. So then, in the big article, I link out to the little article, the smaller article, but that's more in depth on the smaller topic. And I say, hey, if this is what you want to know more about, here's the other article that goes into depth on that. And then in that article, I say, oh, by the way, I have this other article that covers the broader topic. You might be looking for that. And so they link back and forth. And so we end up with around that pillar post, almost like a cluster of articles that are all related to that pillar post and covering that in more depth. And that prevents me from writing a 10,000 word blog post when it's because I can cover it in 3,000 words or 4,000 words maybe, right. But only to maybe a medium level of depth where I then say, there's more to know about here.
I think also from a usability and a stickiness standpoint, you don't want a 10,000 blog post in my mind, because I know for just even the recipe, back to the recipe example, I'm not going to read that whole daggone thing.
Right.
So I prefer it if we get to the point of 2,000, 3,000, I get it. Right. And I prefer when they have a table of contents at the top, because I just, the scroll, especially on a phone, is getting to the point. But then the stickiness comes from if you link internally to other better, hey, we describe this in better detail here, and you click and it goes to another page. Now, from my understanding, I used to say this years and years ago, was that when people ask me, does it matter to Google what they do in your site, how long they stay on your site? And I think it does now. That's a big factor in the algorithm is that stickiness. So that the bounce kind of affects you a little bit. It's not the end all be all. Because I know I have one blog post that I get crazy amount of traffic. It was purely coincidental. I don't even, who knows where it's not even a service that I actually like to promote, but I get crazy traffic from it. But I get a high bounce rate. It's like a 95% bounce rate. And I thought about shutting it down because I didn't want Google to think that's all I got. And I'm curious what your thoughts are on that.
Yeah, I don't worry too much about bounce rate most of the time, because for a high percentage of users, that one article answered their question. That was good enough. And so on most of our blog sites, a bounce rate in the 80+% range is totally normal, even across the site. But I agree with you. There's something to that. We get conflicting signals because Google said no, we don't really look at what people click on next. But I mean, I have Google Analytics on my site. They see that. They're really telling me they're not including that in their algorithm in any way. I do definitely believe that pogo sticking behavior is more detrimental than bounce behavior. So if somebody clicks on my article and they read it and then they're done, they don't continue clicking on other articles, well, that's okay. It's technically a bounce, but they got their answer.
They stayed around long enough to read it. You can see there's like a minute that they were on the site. Yeah.
But then if somebody clicks on my article, then comes back, clicks on the next one, that tells Google, oh, this article maybe didn't totally answer the question. And so you put that in aggregate across all of the searches that your article ranks for. And if they see that trend, like a lot of people leave this article and then click on the next one down. Well, okay, now that could impact where you land. As Google's testing that, that's definitely going to have an impact. I do think that when people click through, I mean, they're definitely tracking that. One thing that I learned that's interesting now with Google Analytics 4, this may have changed, but in the previous iteration of Google Analytics, the time on page number was actually not accurate, because if somebody bounces, Google doesn't know how long they stayed before they left. They actually need a click to occur on your site for them to track it and measure the time in between. So the time on page numbers were always low. With Google Analytics 4, I think that's maybe changed. So if you're using that tracking ID, I think maybe now your time on page is more accurate. But yeah, they used to not be able to know unless they clicked on something else on your site. So I believe that's going into it. If they keep clicking through, they're seeing that behavior on everybody using Google Analytics, at least. I mean, it has to have some kind of impact. I mean, it is a signal to Google about the website itself, not just that single piece of content. Right. So it has to have some kind of algorithm in it. It's probably tiny. It's not the end all be all. It's not going to destroy it, but yeah. So Carrie's asking GAU versus GA4. Should you look at both? I don't know. I think now you should, at least now. Yeah.
For a while.
I'm looking at both. I'm still looking at both because I know where everything is in GAU. There's reports that I like. I can sort of recreate them in Google Analytics 4. I think we're probably going to reach a point where we're going to have to stop using the UA tracking code. We're seeing like Germany is like not okay with Google Analytics anymore because of privacy stuff, and Google Analytics 4 is more they do I guess a better job of anonymizing. It's all on their end. I mean, I don't see any specific user data, but
I don't either. I get nothing except maybe some demographics about age and location, but
and it's just kind of, it's aggregated, it's I don't know who you are that came to my site. So I could see that we might reach a point where Google kind of deprecates the old tracking. And then we're just going to be kind of forced onto Google Analytics 4. I think right now on our sites, I'm using both tracking codes so that I can see both and start trying to get used to the Google Analytics 4. There are insights we can get there that we didn't get before. But I just still haven't gotten into it enough to really make good use of them. I'm not an early adopter on that one.
I'm not either. I struggle with it. I get in there, I'm like, what? This isn't making any sense to me. And I keep telling myself
basics.
who came, who left, what they do in the site, what query did they do that, and I'm sure there's some advanced stuff in there, but and I'm hoping they improve it over time. Like, cause they have to also notice that nobody's going over there and using it right now. So hopefully they're smart enough to know that, like, no one's using this. But
they're trying to get us to adopt it for sure, but people don't want to.
Well, the default is GA4, and you have to go down to the bottom and a little tick up. Yes, I want GA. Eat my GA. Yeah, I hear you.
But like the one I'm missing is just there's the behavior report of like your pages.
Yeah.
the traffic by page. It's like,
Yeah.
I have to dive in to find that. And so I'm thinking I probably need to generate like a custom report screen that's exactly what I want, and just set that default view is probably what I need to do.
But you shouldn't have to. That is, to me, a
Yeah.
very basic report that
Yep.
should just be there. So I don't know why they haven't done that yet. But, well, I don't want to take up too much time. You guys were so patient with me. So I appreciate you guys waiting. Yeah, Carrie's like, yeah, I'm not alone.
Yep.
You are not alone, Carrie. Absolutely. So if anybody doesn't have any more questions, I could stay on for another 2 hours with you because 1,000 questions, but I don't want to take up too much more of your time. I appreciate you coming out and helping. It was a really great presentation. Everybody, I highly recommend going to the channel, checking out what he does. And the course is great. I haven't joined it myself, but I hear really good things about it. So good luck with that. Thank you so much for coming on. Yeah, really great content, Ricky. Really appreciate it. All right. And next time, another content one in April, everybody. So hopefully I'll see you all there. Thank you so much, Ricky. I appreciate it.
You're welcome. It was a pleasure. Thanks, everyone.
Bye, everyone. I think you have to end it because you're the host.
I'll do it. Here we go. Thanks.
Thank you.